The morning sun filtered through the massive windows of the Galactic Military Academy, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Jake Morrison walked through the corridors alongside his fellow human cadets, their boots clicking in rhythm against the metal surface. The academy was unlike anything found on Earth. It floated in space, a massive station that housed thousands of cadets from hundreds of different alien species. Jake had been at the academy for 3 months now, and he still felt the weight of curious stares wherever he went. Humans were new to the galactic community. Most species had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, while humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 2 decades ago. That made them outsiders, newcomers who had to prove they belonged among the established civilizations. Lisa Chang walked beside Jake, her sharp eyes taking in everything around them. She was one of the best tactical minds in their group, always thinking 3 steps ahead. On Jake's other side was Danny Price, a broad-shouldered man who smiled easily but took his training seriously. Behind them, Kate Sullivan moved quietly, observing everything but saying little. The 4 of them had formed a tight unit since arriving at the academy. They were heading to the armory for their first weapons briefing. This was the moment Jake had been waiting for. Combat training with real weapons, not just simulations and physical conditioning. The doors to the armory slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with weapons of every imaginable type. The armory master was a creature called Vothkarn, a Krellian who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His reptilian skin gleamed under the lights, and his 4 eyes swept across the assembled cadets with an expression that might have been amusement. Around the room, cadets from various species gathered, their forms ranging from insectoid to crystalline to gaseous beings contained in environmental suits. Vothkarn began the briefing by gesturing to the weapons displayed on the walls. Energy rifles that could punch through starship armor, plasma weapons that turned targets into superheated ash, graviton disruptors that could crush metal and bone alike. Each weapon was a masterpiece of technology, refined over centuries of warfare across the galaxy. Jake listened carefully, studying each weapon type. They were impressive, no doubt about that. The technology was far beyond what Earth had developed. But something about them felt wrong to him, though he could not quite put his finger on what it was. Vothkarn's 4 eyes settled on the human cadets. There was definitely amusement there now, mixed with something that looked like pity. His voice carried across the room as he spoke. He had heard that humans still used chemical propellant weapons. Was that true? The question hung in the air like a challenge. A ripple of laughter spread through the non-human cadets. Zex, a Vraxian whose body was made of living crystal that refracted light in rainbow patterns, made a clicking sound with his mandibles. It was laughter, Jake knew. The Vraxian was mocking them. Zex said something about primitive combustion technology, calling it charmingly retro. Other cadets joined in the laughter. Jake felt heat rising in his cheeks but kept his face neutral. He had learned quickly that showing anger or embarrassment only made things worse. Instead, he spoke calmly, saying that humans used what worked. It was a simple statement, but it carried weight. A female alien named Sella stepped forward. She was Thessian, one of the most advanced species in the galaxy. Her people had been building energy weapons when humans were still living in caves. Her silver eyes looked at Jake with an expression that mixed pity and contempt. She said that kinetic weapons might work for civilizations that had not yet reached space, but they had no place in modern warfare. The humans would learn soon enough, she added. Vothkarn raised a clawed hand to silence the room. He said that regardless of where they came from, all cadets would need to show skill with standard galactic weapons. Tomorrow they would have their first live-fire exercise. He expected the humans to adapt quickly. The way he said it made it clear what he really meant. Adapt or fail. Adapt or prove that humans did not belong here. As the briefing ended and cadets began filing out, Danny leaned close to Jake and spoke quietly. He said the other cadets thought the humans would wash out of the program. Kate, walking behind them, said softly that they should let the others think what they wanted. They would prove themselves when it counted. Jake nodded but said nothing. His mind was working on something else. During the briefing, while Vothkarn had been showing off the impressive galactic weapons, Jake had noticed something. In the corner of the armory there was a smaller case. Unlike the open displays, this one was locked. And unless Jake was mistaken, it bore markings he recognized. Earth markings. That night, Jake lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling. The other human cadets were already asleep, but his mind would not rest. He kept thinking about that locked case. What weapons from Earth would be stored in a galactic military academy, and why would they be locked away instead of displayed like the other historical weapons? He thought about the laughter in the armory, the mocking voices, the assumption that human technology was primitive and useless. Part of him wanted to be angry, but a larger part of him knew that anger would not help. What they needed was to prove themselves. Actions, not words. Results, not arguments. The Academy's database was available to all cadets. Jake pulled out his datapad and began searching. He looked up the history of human involvement with the galactic community. There was not much information. Humans had made first contact only 20 years ago. They had been granted limited membership in the Galactic Assembly 15 years ago. Full membership had come just 5 years ago. But there was something else. A brief mention of human military units serving alongside galactic forces during border conflicts. 60 years ago, before official first contact, there had been encounters. Small-scale conflicts where human ships had crossed paths with galactic forces. The records were sparse, but they were there. Jake made a mental note to research this further. If humans had fought alongside galactic forces 60 years ago, that meant someone in the galaxy had experience with human weapons and tactics. Someone who knew the truth beyond the mockery and assumptions. He just needed to find that someone. Tomorrow would bring the live fire exercise. Tomorrow, the other cadets would expect the humans to fail. Jake closed his eyes and focused on sleep. They would see soon enough what humans could do. But first, he needed to understand what they were working with, and what they were working against. The combat simulation dome was enormous, a perfect sphere that could recreate any battlefield through advanced technology. Hard light projections combined with force fields to create environments so realistic that cadets often forgot they were in a simulation. Today's exercise was simple in concept but brutal in execution. An urban assault on a fortified position, the kind of grinding, violent combat that separated capable soldiers from casualties. Jake watched as the first squad entered the dome. They were Vraxians led by Zex. Their crystalline bodies moved with surprising speed as they engaged the simulated enemies. Plasma bolts lit up the artificial cityscape. The Vraxians worked as a coordinated unit, clearing buildings methodically. When they finished, their scores appeared on the display board. Impressive numbers. Fast completion time. Minimal damage taken. Next came the Thessians. Sela led her squad with graceful efficiency. Their energy weapons hummed and crackled, tearing through defensive positions. They used shield generators to create mobile cover, advancing under protection while laying down devastating fire. Their scores were even better than the Vraxians. Sela emerged from the dome with a satisfied smile, her silver eyes glancing toward the human cadets as if to say, "Beat that." Other squads followed. Korthans, massive bear-like creatures, used heavy graviton weapons to simply smash through obstacles. Insectoid Klaxians swarmed through the simulation with overwhelming numbers. Each squad had their own style, their own approach, but all of them used energy weapons. All of them followed galactic military doctrine that had been refined over thousands of years. Then it was the human squad's turn. Jake led his team into the dome, each of them carrying standard-issue galactic pulse rifles. The moment Jake held the weapon, he felt that wrongness again. The rifle was too light. The balance was off. The grip did not fit his hand properly. These weapons were designed to be used by many different species, which meant they were optimized for none. The simulation began. Holographic enemies materialized in the urban landscape. Lisa called out contact, pointing toward movement in a building ahead. Jake raised the pulse rifle and aimed at a target in a window. He squeezed the trigger. The weapon hummed and sent a bolt of blue energy downrange. The bolt hit the wall 3 feet to the left of his target. Jake cursed and adjusted his aim. Fired again. This time it was closer but still missed. Around him, his teammates were having the same problem. Danny's shots went wide. Kate, normally precise in everything she did, could not seem to hit anything smaller than a doorway. Lisa was doing slightly better, but even she was missing more than she hit. They pushed through the simulation, but it was a struggle. The pulse rifles felt like they were fighting against them instead of working with them. The trigger pull was inconsistent. The sights did not align properly with human vision. The recoil pattern, such as it was, felt random and unpredictable. By the time they completed the exercise, Jake was frustrated and angry. Their scores appeared on the board. Last place. Dead last among all the squads that had run the exercise. In the observation deck above the dome, Jake could see instructors reviewing the results. Most of them looked unsurprised. This was what they had expected from the humans. Voth Karn made notes on his datapad, his expression showing no emotion. He said something to the other instructors, and several of them nodded in agreement. Jake could not hear the words, but he could guess. The humans were not ready. The humans could not adapt. The humans did not belong here. Back in the barracks, the human squad sat in silence. The frustration was thick in the air. They had trained hard, studied constantly, pushed themselves to their limits. And yet they had failed, not because they lacked skill or courage, but because they were using tools that did not fit them. Lisa broke the silence. She said the weapons were designed wrong. Not wrong in general, but wrong for humans. She had been studying the technical specifications. The pulse rifles were built for species with different vision ranges, different reaction times, different hand structures. Asking a human to be accurate with one was like asking a Thessian to write with their feet. Kate added that galactic military doctrine was different too. Energy weapons emphasized volume of fire and area suppression. You did not need to be precise when you could fill an entire corridor with plasma, but that was not how humans fought. Human military history was built on accuracy, on making each shot count. Danny asked what they could do about it. They were required to use standard galactic weapons. Those were the rules. Jake said nothing, still thinking about that locked case in the armory. There had to be something they were missing, some piece of the puzzle they had not found yet. That evening, Jake was surprised when an instructor came to the human barracks. It was Callarlos, an elderly Thessian who taught advanced tactics. He was old even by Thessian standards, his silver skin marked with scars from decades of combat. Unlike the other instructors, Callarlos did not look at the humans with pity or contempt. He looked at them with something else. Recognition, maybe. Callarlos spoke without greeting or introduction. He said they fought like warriors with their hands bound. The statement hung in the air. Jake and his squad looked at each other, then back at the old instructor. Jake asked what he meant. The Thessian's eyes held a distant look as if seeing into the past. He said he had fought alongside a human unit once, 60 years ago, before humanity had full membership in the Galactic Assembly, during the border conflicts in the contested territories. The humans had carried weapons unlike anything he had seen, simple, brutal, and terrifyingly effective, and in the right hands, devastatingly accurate. Kate leaned forward and asked what kind of weapons. Callarlos smiled slightly. The humans had called them rifles, not energy rifles, kinetic rifles. They fired solid projectiles using controlled explosions, chemical propellants. The other species had mocked those weapons too, Callarlos said, right up until they saw them in action. Lisa asked where those weapons were now. Callarlos' expression darkened. He explained that when humanity joined the Galactic Assembly, there had been pressure. Pressure to adopt standard weapons. Pressure to fit in, to be civilized, to leave behind their primitive technology. Most human military units had complied. But the Academy kept examples of historical weapons from various species, for educational purposes. Jake felt his heart beat faster. He asked about the locked case in the armory. Callarlos nodded slowly. That case contained examples of Earth weapons, preserved, maintained, but unused for 60 years, locked away like embarrassing relics of a less advanced time. The old Thessian explained that the final examination for advanced cadets was in 3 weeks. It was a free-form combat scenario where cadets could requisition any equipment they could justify. He suggested the humans find a very good justification. Then he turned to leave. Before he reached the door, Callarlos stopped and looked back at Jake. He said the humans he had fought beside had a saying. Beware the old warrior in a profession where most die young. Those warriors carried old weapons for a reason, not because they could not learn new ones, but because the old ones worked. He left without another word. The human squad sat in stunned silence. Then Danny started laughing. It was not mocking laughter, but the laugh of someone who had just understood a joke. He said they had been trying to fight like Thessians and Vraxians and Korthans, trying to adapt to weapons and tactics that were not built for them, when they should have been fighting like humans. Jake pulled out his datapad and started searching the Academy database with new purpose. If there were Earth weapons here, there would be records. specifications, history, everything they needed to understand what Callarlos was talking about. Everything they needed to prove that human weapons were not primitive relics, but tools designed for human hands and human tactics. Lisa joined him, pulling up files on human military history. Kate started researching the rules for the final examination, looking for any restrictions or requirements they needed to know. Danny began planning training schedules, figuring out how much time they had to prepare. For the first time since the failed exercise, Jake felt hope. They had a path forward now. A way to prove themselves that did not require them to be something they were not. They just needed to remember what it meant to fight like humans. For 2 weeks, the human cadets lived in the Academy's archives. Every spare moment between regular training was spent researching, studying, understanding. What they discovered was both humbling and energizing. Earth's military history stretched back thousands of years, soaked in blood and innovation. While other species had discovered faster-than-light travel and jumped directly to energy weapons, skipping intermediate steps, humans had refined projectile weapons into an art form. Jake read about wars fought across continents with rifles that could reach targets over a kilometer away. Weapons so reliable they could function in deserts, jungles, frozen wastelands, simple enough that a soldier could maintain them with basic tools, yet accurate enough to hit a target the size of a human head at 500 meters. The more he read, the more he understood what Callarlos had meant. Lisa made a breakthrough one evening. She had been studying comparative biology, looking at how different species perceived and interacted with their environments. She called the others over to her workstation, excitement in her voice. She had found something important. Human visual processing and fine motor control had evolved for a specific purpose: persistence hunting and tool manipulation. Humans could track moving objects with precision that most galactic species could not match. Their hand-eye coordination was exceptional. Kate looked over the data and added another piece. Human spatial processing was different too. Humans were very good at calculating trajectories, predicting where a moving object would be. It came from their evolutionary history as hunters who threw spears and stones. This advantage was wasted on energy weapons that did not need precise aim. Danny pulled up tactical doctrine files from various galactic militaries. He pointed out the patterns. Galactic combat emphasized suppressive fire and area denial. You did not need pinpoint accuracy when you could fill a corridor with plasma or create a graviton field that crushed everything in a 10-meter radius. The weapons were designed for that kind of fighting. Broad, powerful, overwhelming. But kinetic weapons were different, Jake realized. A bullet was a single projectile following a predictable path. No energy bloom, no plasma spread. You put it exactly where you aimed it. And if your species had evolved to be very good at aiming, at calculating trajectories, at making precise movements, then kinetic weapons became devastatingly effective. They assembled their findings into a formal equipment requisition. Jake wrote the justification carefully, citing biological advantages, historical precedent, tactical doctrine analysis. He argued that requiring humans to use energy weapons was like requiring Vraxians to fight without using their crystalline nature, or forcing Korthans to use light weapons instead of heavy ones. Each species fought best when using equipment suited to their natural abilities. He submitted the requisition to Callarlos, who approved it without comment. Then it went to the examination board for final approval. Jake waited anxiously for 3 days. When the response came back, his hands shook slightly as he opened the message. Permission granted. But there was a condition. The humans would need to demonstrate their weapons' effectiveness in a preliminary trial before the full examination. Against volunteer cadets, the board wanted proof that this was not just nostalgia or stubbornness. They wanted to see results. Jake had barely finished reading the message when the Academy's communication system lit up with a challenge. Zex had volunteered to face the humans. The Vraxian had assembled a team of the Academy's top performers. He broadcast a message to the entire Academy saying he wanted to see these legendary human weapons before they became museum pieces again. The mockery in his voice was clear. The trial was scheduled for 2 days later. Jake accepted immediately. They had their chance. Now they needed to be ready for it. That evening, the human squad entered the armory. Vothkarn was waiting for them, looking deeply unhappy about the entire situation. He unlocked the case containing Earth weapons with slow, deliberate movements. Inside, carefully preserved in climate-controlled storage, lay 4 rifles. Jake recognized them from his research. A carbine rifle, compact and versatile. A precision marksman rifle with a long barrel and magnified optics. A submachine gun for close-quarters combat. And something more advanced. An experimental railgun that used electromagnetic acceleration instead of chemical propellants. Voth Karn said the weapons had not been fired in 60 years. The ammunition was old. They might not even function properly. His tone suggested he hoped they would fail. Jake said simply that they would function. He reached into the case and lifted the carbine. The moment his hands closed around the weapon, Jake felt something click into place. The weight was right. The balance was perfect. The way it settled into his shoulder. The way his finger found the trigger. The way the sights aligned with his natural point of aim. This felt like it had been made for him. Because it had been made for humans by humans refined through generations of warfare. Lisa chose the precision rifle, running her hands along the barrel with reverence. Danny picked up the submachine gun, checking the mechanism with practiced movements he did not remember learning. Kate studied the railgun for a long moment before lifting it carefully. It was heavier than the others, more complex, but her eyes gleamed with interest. They spent that night and the next day familiarizing themselves with the weapons, running through drills with empty chambers, learning the manual of arms, the reload procedures, the maintenance requirements. It felt natural in a way the energy weapons never had, like muscle memory from ancestors they had never met. Jake practiced aiming drills for hours. The carbine's sights lined up perfectly with his vision. The trigger pull was crisp and consistent. When he dry-fired at targets, the weapon stayed on point, no wandering, no drift. He could feel his accuracy improving with each repetition. Lisa worked with the precision rifle, learning to control her breathing, to squeeze the trigger between heartbeats. The rifle was designed for extreme accuracy at long range. It required patience and skill, but Lisa had both. By the end of the first day, she was consistently hitting targets the size of a coin at 100 meters. Danny's submachine gun was built for a different purpose. Close quarters combat, multiple targets, fast engagement. He practiced transitioning between targets, controlled bursts instead of wild spraying. The weapon chattered in his hands like it was speaking a language he understood. Kate's railgun was the most complex of the four. It used magnetic fields to accelerate projectiles to hypersonic velocities. The technology was more advanced than the chemical weapons, but it was still kinetic. Still a single projectile going exactly where you aimed it. Kate studied the weapon systems, learning its quirks and capabilities. Word of the upcoming trial had spread through the academy. Cadets from dozens of species wanted to watch. Some were curious. Many were skeptical. A few were openly hostile, seeing this as humans refusing to adapt, clinging to primitive technology out of stubbornness. The night before the trial, Jake could not sleep. He lay in his bunk, the carbine cleaned and ready beside him. Tomorrow would prove whether Calor was right, whether human weapons could stand alongside galactic technology, whether all their research and practice meant anything. Lisa was awake too. She spoke quietly in the darkness, asking Jake if he was nervous. He admitted he was. This was not just about passing an examination. It was about proving that humans belonged in the galactic community, that their different path to the stars was not a weakness but a strength. Kate's voice came from another bunk. She said they were ready. They had trained hard, studied carefully, prepared thoroughly. Whatever happened tomorrow, they would give it everything they had. Danny agreed, his usual humor subdued by the weight of what was coming. Jake thought about all the humans who would come after them. Future cadets who would face the same mockery, the same assumptions, the same pressure to abandon their heritage and conform. If the trial went well, it would open doors. If it went badly, those doors might close for a long time. He finally fell asleep thinking about Calor's words. The old warrior in a profession where most die young. Humans had been warriors for thousands of years, fighting with whatever weapons they could make. From stones and spears to rifles and railguns, they had survived by being adaptable, determined, and precise. Tomorrow they would show the galaxy what that meant. The weapons were ready. The ammunition was loaded. The squad was prepared. Now they just needed to prove that sometimes the old ways endured because they worked, because they had been tested in the crucible of human history and found worthy. Tomorrow the cadets would learn why you should never underestimate a human with a rifle. One shot would be enough to teach that lesson. The observation deck was packed. Cadets from every species at the academy had come to watch. Some stood, some sat. Some floated in their environmental suits. The air buzzed with conversation in 100 different languages. Most of the talk was about the same thing. The humans were going to use primitive weapons against modern galactic armaments. This would be a short demonstration. Jake could hear the conversations as his squad prepared in the ready room. The walls were thin enough that voices carried through. Cadets were placing bets on how quickly Zex's team would win. The most optimistic predictions gave the humans 2 minutes. Most thought it would be over in less than 1. Lisa checked her precision rifle one more time, her movements calm and methodical. Danny inspected his submachine gun's magazine, counting rounds by touch. Kate powered up the railgun, watching the magnetic field indicators come online. Jake ran through his own checks on the carbine, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. The scenario was straightforward. A simulated asteroid mining facility with multiple levels and corridors. Zex's squad would defend a central command center. The humans would assault it. First team to eliminate all opponents or capture the objective would win. Simple rules, but the execution would be anything but simple. Zex and his team had the best equipment the Academy could provide. Krellian plasma rifles that could melt through bulkheads, Thessian shield generators that could absorb tremendous amounts of energy, Phyrexian energy blades for close combat. They were the Academy's elite, and they knew it. In the ready room across the hall, Jake could hear them laughing, confident and relaxed. The trial began. Jake led his squad into the facility from the lower entrance. The corridors were tight, lined with mining equipment and storage containers. Industrial lighting cast harsh shadows. The whole environment was designed to be challenging, with multiple sight lines and limited cover. They moved slowly, carefully. Jake kept the carbine at the ready, finger alongside the trigger guard, barrel pointed at the ground. Behind him, Lisa scanned with her rifle's magnified optic. Danny covered their rear. Kate moved with them, the railgun humming softly as its systems maintained charge. Kate spotted them first. She whispered contact, her enhanced optics picking up heat signatures ahead. 3 defenders in an elevated position about 100 meters down the main corridor. Through his carbine's simple optical sight, Jake could see them. Sella and 2 other Thessian cadets positioned on a catwalk overlooking the approach. Their shield generators hummed, creating shimmering barriers of energy. The Thessians looked confident. Almost bored. They had the high ground, good cover, and shields that could absorb energy weapon fire indefinitely. They were not taking the humans seriously. Why would they? Chemical weapons against energy shields seemed like a mismatch in the shield's favor. Lisa noted quietly that they were not even maintaining proper alertness. Danny agreed. The defenders thought this would be easy. Kate said nothing, just studied the shields through her railgun's advanced targeting system. Jake's mind calculated. Energy shields were designed to disperse thermal and electromagnetic energy. They were very effective against plasma weapons, energy beams, particle accelerators. But kinetic projectiles were different. The shields would stop bullets, yes. They could create force fields that would intercept physical objects. But shields had limitations. Refresh rates, power consumption. Weak points were the emitters connected to the generators. He asked Kate if she could hit the right side shield generator. It was a difficult shot. The generator was partially concealed behind support struts. The heatsink, the vulnerable component, was only partially exposed. At 100 meters, threading that needle required perfect accuracy. Kate studied the target through her optics. The railgun used electromagnetic acceleration to fire a projectile at hypersonic speed. The round would cross the distance in a fraction of a second. No drop, no wind drift in the controlled atmosphere. Just pure ballistic calculation. She said quietly that she could make the shot. Jake watched the tactical situation, waited for Sella to shift position slightly, creating the sightline Kate needed. The moment came. He gave the order. Kate fired. The railgun's report was unlike anything the Galactic cadets had heard before. A sharp electromagnetic crack followed immediately by a supersonic boom as the projectile broke the sound barrier. The round crossed 100 meters in less than 1/10 of a second and struck the shield generator's heatsink with surgical precision. The generator exploded. Sparks and smoke erupted from the damaged equipment. The shield collapsed instantly. Sella's eyes went wide with shock. She started to move, started to react, but she was already too late. Lisa's precision rifle cracked once. A single shot. The bullet crossed the distance while Sella was still processing what had happened. It struck her center mass. The simulation sensors registered a fatal hit. Sela was eliminated before she even understood she was in danger. The two remaining Thessians opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, superheating metal where they struck. But Jake and Danny were already moving. They used the mining equipment as cover, moving fast and low. Danny's submachine gun chattered in short, controlled bursts. 3-round groups that forced the defenders to take cover. Not random spraying. Precise, aimed fire that kept the Thessians' heads down. Jake flanked left while Danny suppressed. The carbine moved with him like an extension of his body. He saw a defender pop up to return fire. Squeezed the trigger twice. 2 rounds, center mass. The cadet went down. Transitioned to the second defender. 2 more rounds, eliminated. 3 enemies down in less than 10 seconds. Jake's carbine still had 25 rounds in the magazine. He had fired exactly 4 shots. In the observation deck, the conversations had stopped. Silence filled the space as cadets stared at the tactical display in disbelief. What had just happened? How had the humans moved so fast, shot so accurately? Those were supposed to be primitive weapons. Zex and his remaining squad members abandoned their defensive position in the command center. They were moving to reinforce, but they were following galactic doctrine. Maintain fields of fire. Establish proper range brackets for energy weapons. Create kill zones based on plasma dispersion patterns. The humans fought differently. They did not establish kill zones. They created ambushes. They used terrain and patience. Each shot was deliberate, aimed, purposeful. No wasted ammunition, no suppressive fire for its own sake. Just clean, efficient violence delivered with precision. Jake's squad encountered the next group of defenders in a warehouse section. 4 hostiles with good positions. But Kate had worked ahead, using her railgun to destroy their cover from an unexpected angle. When the defenders moved to new positions, Lisa was waiting. 4 shots, 4 hits. The precision rifle spoke its quiet language of death, and the defenders went down. Danny cleared a side corridor, his submachine gun chattering briefly. 5 rounds to eliminate 2 defenders who had tried to flank. When Jake checked on him, Danny reported both targets down with his usual calm. No drama, no wasted motion, just professional execution of a combat task. Zex himself made his stand in the command center with his last 2 team members. They had energy barriers erected, overlapping fields of fire, every advantage tactical planning could provide. It should have been impregnable. It was not. Kate's railgun destroyed 1 barrier generator. Lisa's precision shot took out another. When the barriers fell, Jake and Danny moved in with practiced coordination. The Vraxians fought well, but energy blades required getting close. Bullets worked fine at 10 meters. The carbine and submachine gun spoke together, a brief symphony of controlled violence. Then silence. The simulation ended. All of Zex's squad eliminated. The humans had taken no casualties. 0. Not even a simulated wound. Jake lowered his carbine and looked up at the observation deck. Through the transparent wall, he could see hundreds of faces staring down at him. Shock, disbelief, awe. The mockery was gone. The laughter had died. In its place was something new. Respect maybe, or fear, perhaps both. He checked his carbine, counting the rounds he had fired. 7. 7 rounds in an engagement against 8 elite opponents. Lisa had used 6 rounds from her precision rifle. Danny had fired 12 bursts from his submachine gun, controlled 3-round groups. Kate had fired 4 railgun shots. Total ammunition expenditure was less than 50 rounds for the entire engagement. In the observation deck, only one sound broke the silence. Kalor's voice, quiet but carrying. The old Thessian spoke to no one in particular, but everyone heard him. He said simply that sometimes one shot was all you needed. Sometimes precision mattered more than power. Sometimes the old ways endured because they worked. Jake ejected his magazine and secured his weapon. Around him, his squad did the same. They had proven their point. Now they needed to see if the galaxy was ready to learn the lesson. The Academy's hallways buzzed with conversation for days after the trial. Everywhere Jake went, cadets stared at him and his squad. Some looked at them with new respect. Others seemed confused, as if the universe had suddenly stopped making sense. A few appeared hostile, as though the humans had somehow cheated by being good at something the galaxy had dismissed as worthless. But many cadets approached with genuine curiosity. They asked questions about the weapons, the tactics, the training. How did humans aim so precisely? What made kinetic weapons effective? Could other species learn to use them? Jake and his squad answered patiently, explaining the principles, demonstrating techniques, sharing what they had learned. The instructors were divided. Some, like Vothkarn, remained skeptical. The Krellian argued during evaluation board meetings that a single demonstration proved nothing. Kinetic weapons had inherent limitations, he insisted. Limited ammunition capacity, no sustained fire capability, vulnerable to environmental factors. The humans had succeeded through surprise, nothing more. Give opponents time to adapt and the advantage would disappear. But Calor disagreed strongly. The old Thessian argued that the humans had succeeded through superior marksmanship and tactical thinking. Those were qualities the Academy claimed to value. If cadets could achieve better results with kinetic weapons than with energy weapons, then maybe the problem was not with the cadets. Maybe it was with the weapons. The debate lasted for hours across multiple meetings. Finally, the Academy Commandant made a decision. The Commandant was Kethan, his species among the oldest in the galaxy. His people had founded the Academy thousands of years ago. When he spoke, everyone listened. He said the humans would participate in the final examination with their chosen weapons. But there was a condition. They would face the most difficult scenario the Academy could devise. If they failed, it would prove that kinetic weapons were indeed obsolete, suitable only for limited situations. If they succeeded, then perhaps the galaxy needed to reconsider some assumptions. The final examination scenario was announced a week later. A hostage rescue in a zero-gravity environment aboard a derelict space station. The mission had multiple layers of difficulty. Enemy combatants throughout the station. Civilian hostages wearing sensor suits that would register any stray fire as casualties. A strict time limit. And the added challenge of operating in weightlessness. Every squad that attempted the scenario before the humans had failed. The Raxians came close but accidentally hit 2 hostages with plasma fire. The Thessians ran out of time trying to be too cautious. The Korthans caused structural damage that the simulation ruled as catastrophic failure. Energy weapons were too powerful, too indiscriminate for the delicate work required. Jake's squad prepared carefully. They studied the scenario, planned their approach, rehearsed movements in the Academy's zero-gravity training facility. The challenge was significant. In zero gravity, every action had an equal and opposite reaction. Firing a weapon would push you backward. Moving required careful use of handholds and magnetic boots, and the hostages meant they could not afford a single stray shot. The day of the examination arrived. The observation deck was packed again, but the atmosphere was different now. No one was laughing. No one was making jokes about primitive human weapons. The cadets and instructors watched with serious attention, curious to see if the humans could handle this challenge. Jake led his squad into the simulated space station. They moved carefully through weightless corridors using magnetic boots to maintain position. Each human claimed a sector, creating overlapping fields of fire while ensuring they would not accidentally shoot toward hostages. The coordination had to be perfect. The first group of enemies appeared holding hostages as shields. This was the nightmare scenario. Energy weapons would cook the hostage along with the hostile. Graviton weapons would crush both. Even missing with a plasma bolt could superheat nearby surfaces enough to cause lethal injuries. But a bullet went exactly where aimed. Only where aimed, Jake took the shot. One round, precisely placed through a gap between the hostile's helmet and shoulder armor. The simulation registered a fatal hit. The hostage was unharmed. They moved forward. Lisa encountered a more difficult situation. A hostile holding a hostage, both bodies overlapping from her angle. Any shot seemed impossible, but Lisa did what she had trained to do. She controlled her breathing, waited for her heart to beat, calculated the trajectory accounting for the lack of gravity and her own slight movement, squeezed the trigger between heartbeats. The bullet passed within 2 centimeters of the hostage's head. It entered the hostile's eye slit and struck the brain. Instant elimination. The hostage was safe. In the observation deck, several instructors leaned forward in their seats. That shot would be studied for years. Danny cleared a section where 3 hostiles were using 4 hostages as shields. The situation seemed impossible. But Danny had practiced for this. His submachine gun fired in controlled single shots, not bursts. 1 bullet per target, placed with absolute precision through gaps in armor, between limbs in the millisecond when a hostile shifted position. 3 shots, 3 eliminations, 0 hostage casualties. Kate's railgun proved its worth when they encountered armored hostiles in a section with delicate life support equipment. Energy weapons would have damaged the systems. The railgun's projectile punched through armor without creating splash damage or thermal effects. Clean holes, catastrophic to the target but leaving everything else untouched. They worked through the station methodically. Every shot counted. Every movement was deliberate. The zero-gravity environment that had complicated things for other squads actually helped the humans. No gravity meant no bullet drop. Trajectories were perfectly straight lines. For a species evolved to calculate thrown projectile paths, it was almost easier than normal gravity. The time limit ticked down. Jake's squad reached the final section where the remaining hostiles had barricaded themselves with the last group of hostages. This was the moment that had defeated every other squad. Too many targets in too small a space. Too much risk of collateral damage. But Jake saw something the others had missed. The station structure had metal beams and support struts. Bullets could ricochet if the angle was right. He calculated quickly, finding the geometry he needed. He fired once at a support strut. The bullet ricocheted exactly as he had predicted, striking a hostile from an unexpected angle. The hostile went down. The remaining enemies were so surprised by the ricochet that they hesitated for just a moment. That was all the humans needed. 4 precision shots in rapid succession, 4 eliminations, 0 hostage casualties. Mission complete with 30 seconds to spare. The simulation ended. Jake's squad floated in zero gravity, weapons secured, every hostage safe. In the observation deck, the silence lasted for 3 full seconds. Then applause began, not just from human supporters but from cadets of every species. Even Voth Karn was nodding slowly, forced to acknowledge what he had witnessed. The evaluation board met immediately after the examination. Their decision was unanimous. The human squad had passed with the highest scores ever recorded for the scenario. More importantly, they had demonstrated that kinetic weapons in skilled hands could accomplish things energy weapons could not. The commandant made an announcement that surprised everyone. Effective immediately, the Academy would expand its armory to include kinetic weapons training. Not just for humans, but for any species who wished to learn. The assumption that newer always meant better had made the Academy complacent. This assumption had nearly cost them a valuable tactical option. Zex approached Jake after the ceremony. The Vraxian's crystalline body refracted light in patterns that indicated respect and perhaps embarrassment. He said he had underestimated Jake and his squad. He had been wrong about the weapons and the methods. He would not make that mistake again. Jake shook the offered appendage, feeling the cool crystal against his hand. He said there were no hard feelings. The challenges had pushed them to be better, to prove themselves. That was what the Academy was for. Learning and growth. Lisa joined them and added an interesting thought. What if they combined their approaches? Energy weapons for some situations, kinetic weapons for others. Learn from each other instead of assuming one way was right. Share knowledge and techniques across species lines. Kale Orr, standing nearby, smiled at that. He said that was the thinking of a true warrior. Victory did not come from the weapon itself, but from knowing when and how to use it, understanding strengths and limitations, choosing the right tool for the job. That night, Jake stood in the armory one final time. The carbine was secured in its case again, but everything had changed. Beside it now were requisition forms from non-human cadets requesting kinetic weapons training, requests to study human tactical doctrine, questions about ammunition types, barrel rifling, ballistic calculations. The mockery had turned to respect. The laughter had been silenced, not through boasting or arrogance, but through demonstration, through skill, through remembering that humanity's path to the stars had been different, and that difference was a strength rather than a weakness. Jake thought about everything that had happened. The failed first exercise with energy weapons, the discovery of Earth weapons in storage,